The night was quiet, but her stomach wasn't. It growled like a small, angry animal, reminding her that she hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days. A girl of only 16 sitting on the cold steps outside a restaurant where the warm smell of fried chicken and spices filled the air. Her name was Elara, an orphan, left with no family, no safety net, and no one to call her own. She had learned to survive on scraps, and sometimes even those were hard to find. Her clothes were faded, her shoes had holes, and her eyes told a story no one cared to listen to. But inside, beyond all that pain, was a fire that had not gone out. She had dreams, small, fragile dreams she guarded in silence. Dreams of cooking, of serving meals that made people feel at home, of owning a place where no one was turned away hungry. But dreams don't fill empty stomachs. Reality hit hard when hunger clawed through her chest. So one evening, she took a chance. She entered the restaurant she always stared at from outside. The place was bright, filled with laughter and clinking glasses. Families ate together. Children spilled crumbs on the floor, and plates came out steaming from the kitchen. Elara stepped inside timidly, clutching a small paper bag in her hand. Inside that bag was all she had cooked that morning. 2 flatbreads and a stew made from leftover vegetables she had found at the market. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She hoped maybe someone would trade her a meal for it. Or maybe she could offer it to the staff just for kindness. But instead of kindness, she met cruelty. When she approached the counter, a group of young girls sitting nearby noticed her. They were dressed in neat clothes, their nails painted, their laughter sharp like broken glass. One of them whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear what she holding. Probably trash from the street. Another giggled, pointing at Elara's bag. Maybe it's rat food. Orphan food. The group burst out laughing, their voices echoing through the restaurant. Even the waiter behind the counter smirked as he glanced at the worn-out bag in her hands. Elara felt her cheeks burn. Her chest tightened, but she tried to keep her voice steady. I made this. I thought maybe, but before she could finish, one of the girls reached out, snatched the bag, and emptied it on the table. The flatbreads fell apart and the stew leaked out of the cracked container, staining the tablecloth. The girls laughed harder, holding their noses as if it smelled disgusting. Who would eat this? One sneered. You think this is food for people like us? Go back to the streets where you belong. The restaurant fell silent for a moment, but no one defended her. Not one customer, not one waiter, not even the manager. Elara's eyes stung, not just from humiliation, but from the weight of being invisible. She picked up the broken pieces of her meal with trembling hands, her heart breaking with every second. And then she walked out, carrying nothing but silence. That night, she sat under the same restaurant's window, hugging her knees to her chest. She didn't cry. She wanted to, but she was too used to swallowing tears. Instead, she whispered to herself, one day, they will not laugh. One day, they will eat what I make, and they will pay for it. It was not a threat. It was a promise. The next morning, Elara woke up with determination that felt heavier than her hunger. She went to the market again, not for scraps, but for inspiration. She studied the vendors, how they sold, how they presented their food, how they treated their customers. She noticed that kindness drew people in more than spices did. She watched how people's faces lit up when they were served with respect. Not just food, but dreams need more than observation. They need action. So she began cooking on the streets. Not much, just a small corner with a borrowed pan and a makeshift stove. She cooked the same stew, the same flatbreads, but this time with more care, with more love. At first, people walked by uninterested. Some even mocked her again, calling her the orphan cook. But she didn't stop. Day after day she returned. She seasoned better, she presented better, she served with a smile no matter how tired she was. Slowly, a few people began to notice. A passerby one day tried her stew, surprised by its flavor. Another came the next day asking for more. Soon, workers from nearby shops began stopping by during lunch. They paid little, but they paid, and Elara saved every single coin. Her food was simple, but it had something most expensive restaurants lacked: heart. She cooked not just to fill stomachs, but to comfort souls. People felt it and they returned. Word spread like the smell of her stew carried by the wind. But life doesn't reward persistence without testing it first. One evening, just as her small street corner was starting to gather a line, a storm rolled in. Rain poured down heavily, washing away her stove, her food, and her earnings for the day. People ran for shelter, but Elara stood in the rain, drenched and trembling. Her coin slipped from her hand into the muddy street, disappearing before her eyes. That night, she broke. For the first time in a long time, she cried openly. She felt cursed, as if the world wanted her to fail. "Why me?" she whispered to the dark sky. "Why always me?" But as the rain slowed, a hand touched her shoulder. It was an old man, one of her regular customers, a shoemaker who barely made ends meet himself. He handed her a small umbrella, cracked and broken at the edges. "Don't stop, child," he said softly. "Your food is the only warm thing I have in my day. If you stop, the world will be colder." His words lit something inside her again. She realized then it wasn't about her anymore. It was about the people who needed her food, her kindness, her presence. She could not quit, because someone out there counted on her. So she rose again. With more strength than before, she rebuilt her corner. She borrowed money, she bargained with vendors, she cooked longer hours. Her hands bled, her back ached, but her spirit refused to bend. And slowly, her little street stall became a gathering place, not just for workers, but for students, travelers, and even families. Months passed, and Elara's stall became known as the Orphan's Kitchen. At first, people used the name to mock her, but soon it became a title of respect. People would say proudly, "I ate at the Orphan's Kitchen today. You must try it." One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the street, Elara stood behind her stall, watching the line grow longer than ever before. Her hands were tired, but her heart was full. For the first time, she felt something she had never truly known: hope. But destiny wasn't finished with her, because the very same restaurant that had mocked her, the very same place where her food was spilled and her pride shattered, was about to cross paths with her once more. And this time, everything would be different. The restaurant that once mocked her was losing its glow. Business had slowed down. Customers complained about high prices and cold service, and the laughter that used to echo inside those walls had faded into silence. But fate works in ways no one can predict, and one night, as Elara served her last few bowls of stew from her stall, a man in a neat suit approached. He looked around at the long line, at the people eating happily on benches and curbsides, and then back at Elara. "Young lady," he said, his voice curious but respectful, "would you be interested in cooking for my place tomorrow? We need someone like you." Elara paused. "His place?" She tilted her head, waiting for him to explain. He shifted nervously. "The restaurant down the street, the one with the red lanterns." Her chest tightened. That place, the place where her food was thrown on the table, where laughter had cut her like a knife. For a moment, the memories stung so deep she almost said no. But then she looked at the people in her line, smiling, eating, calling her food the best they'd ever had. She remembered her promise, that one day they would eat what she made. Maybe this was the day. So she nodded. I'll come. The next evening, Elara walked into that restaurant once more. But this time her clothes were clean, her hair tied neatly, her hands steady. She carried nothing but her small basket of spices and herbs, the ones that gave her food its warmth. The staff watched her with surprise, some with doubt, some with whispers. And then the same group of girls who once mocked her walked in. They didn't notice her at first, but when they did, their laughter froze. The manager, desperate for business, let Elara cook that night's special. She chose to make her stew, the same simple dish they had laughed at, the same one that had carried her through storms and sleepless nights. The kitchen filled with its aroma, rich and comforting, wrapping around the walls like a gentle embrace. Customers leaned forward, sniffing, whispering about the smell. Plates came out steaming and beautiful, and one by one people tasted. Their eyes widened, their lips curled into smiles. Whispers turned into exclamations. This is incredible. Where has this been all my life? The restaurant, once empty and lifeless, buzzed with energy again. The same girls who had mocked her years ago sat frozen at their table, holding spoons in their hands. They hesitated, then took a bite. Their expressions shifted from arrogance to disbelief, then to silence. For the first time, they couldn't find laughter. They couldn't find words, because the girl they had humiliated now owned their taste buds, their hearts, their attention. The manager rushed to Elara, thrilled. Stay here, cook for us every night, and I'll pay you double what you make on the street. But Elara shook her head gently. No, this is not my home. I will build my own. She left that restaurant behind, not with anger, not with revenge, but with quiet dignity. She had proven her point without raising her voice. She didn't need to humiliate anyone back. Her food spoke for her. Weeks later, with the coins she had saved, the help of her loyal customers and the encouragement of the old shoemaker who first believed in her, Elara opened her own small restaurant. The sign above the door read in bold letters, "The Orphan's Table." It wasn't grand at first, just a handful of wooden tables, a small kitchen, and her warm smile greeting every guest. But the heart she poured into every dish made it more valuable than gold. People came from all across the city to eat at her restaurant, to feel the comfort of her food, to share in the kindness she had never been given but always offered. The line outside her door grew longer each day, stretching down the street. Newspapers wrote about her, calling her the girl who cooked her way out of the streets. Food critics, who once ignored her, now praised her dishes as some of the most soulful in the city. She hired staff, other orphans, people like her who had been overlooked and mocked. Together they created not just a restaurant, but a family. One evening, as Elara walked through her busy restaurant, she noticed a familiar group sitting quietly at a corner table. The same girls who had once spilled her stew were now eating at her place, their eyes lowered, their voices hushed. Elara paused for a moment, her chest tightening. She could have turned them away. She could have reminded them of their cruelty. But instead she walked over, placed her hand gently on the table, and smiled. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I hope the food makes you feel at home." The girls looked up, guilt written all over their faces. One of them whispered, "We're sorry for what we did." Elara nodded, her eyes kind but firm. "We all make mistakes, but food is meant to heal, not hurt. Eat. You are welcome here." And just like that, the circle closed. What began as humiliation ended in forgiveness. What started with mockery ended with respect. Years passed, and the orphan's table grew into something greater than Elara had ever dreamed. It became not just a restaurant, but a symbol of resilience, of kindness, of how even the most broken beginnings can turn into the brightest futures. People traveled from other cities, other countries, just to taste the stew that carried her through hunger, through storms, through laughter that once hurt but no longer mattered. One night, after closing, Elara sat at a table alone, looking around at the place she had built. The wooden walls glowed in the soft light. The air smelled of spices and warmth, and the sound of laughter still lingered from earlier in the evening. She thought of her younger self, the girl sitting outside in the cold, hungry and invisible, holding her little bag of food. She wished she could go back and tell that girl, "Don't give up. One day, this will all be yours." And though she couldn't go back, she smiled, because in a way that girl had never truly been gone. She was still here, in every dish, in every smile, in every person who walked through her doors and left with a full stomach and a fuller heart. In the end, Elara's story wasn't about revenge, or proving anyone wrong. It was about proving herself right, that her dreams were worth fighting for, that kindness is stronger than cruelty, and that no matter where you start, you can build a life so beautiful it silences every doubt. Because sometimes the world mocks your food, your clothes, your dreams. But if you hold on, if you keep cooking, keep fighting, keep believing, one day the very same world will sit at your table and ask for seconds.